Welcome to the Blackburn End Podcast season review. In a season where it was either feast or famine when it came to form, Rovers started the year expecting to be mid-table, maybe a bit lower than that, to be honest. But we ended up at the giddy heights of 7th and just outside the playoff places. At one point on the final day, obviously, we was in 5th position and we was all getting excited. But there were storylines across the season. There were dramas. Was it a good season? Well, I've got just the man to help me dissect it, Mark. It's good to see you. Are you ready to relive this season?
I am. Do you know what? I've been looking back over it over the weekend, and it's mad, isn't it? When as we'll get into it now, when you look back at the different feelings around different elements of the season, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I mean, I was the same. I was looking, and it feels like so much happened this season, and every single game we try to delve into and get details, but it's like I just can't remember any of them. And like I'm trying to think back in these first few games. So let's actually start the season. So the transfers that came. Let's talk transfers. So we lose Schmodix. He manages to play a couple of games for us. Sam Gallagher, my main man, he's left obviously with Volstead, and Telolovic or Telolovic, whichever way you want to pronounce it, he then goes. So we then start thinking who's going to come in, and I seem to remember it was all a bit late in the day trying to replace strikers and so on. First off, what was your first feelings about the outgoings?
I think Schmodix was always going to happen. I think the fee was something that was dictated by his age a little bit, and the timing of it wasn't great, was it? We could have done with that happening earlier, but I just think that's something we accept. I felt that we did really, really well to get our money back on Volstead and Telolovic. Whoever kept the receipts there needs really praising. And when I look at the squad in terms of the balance going into the window and coming out of the window, and then just overall in terms of strength of the squad, I think that was the first transfer window in about 4 or 5 that we got better. I think there was a lot of work that still needed to be done, but I think we were better and we had a better balance. We had Danny Bart, for example, had come in, give us some real good experience. Andy Vime, and you started looking at a couple of people and you were like, yeah, I really get why we brought them in. Obviously, Travis.
Let's quickly talk about the incomings then. You've brought up a couple there. So obviously some players leave, and you can see some like replacements. So Sam Gallagher, he departs for about the same value that we pay for Matt Targay, who comes in. You have Toth coming in, Cantwell, Vyman, Danny Bart, and then the loan transfers of Kozia Dewberry, Lewis Baker, and Owen Beck. But there was one big free transfer in Ohashi, and I felt like completely what you're saying. I felt like we'd improved, and I seem to remember us coming out of it and saying, actually, okay, yes, we've lost Schmodix, but he was always going to go. But generally, Schmodix aside, everyone else seemed like a bit of an upgrade.
Yeah, I think we obviously didn't know much about Toth, but we'd seen enough of Volstead to say he wasn't the answer. So let's have another risk, if you like. I think the terminology we were using at the time around Sam Gallagher was, I've seen enough of Sam Gallagher. I know what I'm going to get. He's not on the pitch enough and he doesn't deliver enough when he is. We're willing to roll the dice, I think was the phrase I remember you using. And I think that's absolutely what we did. We got somebody in Matt Targay who's a similar stature, I suppose, to Gallagher. But we were just hoping, do you know what? I'd rather try something different because I'd seen enough and I was bored of what I was looking at. But I still look back at it and I think Andy Vyman and Bart to me were the ones that I could hang my hat on. I think certainly Vyman, I knew what I was going to get from him. I didn't think he would play as much as he did, same with Danny Bart, but I thought, do you know what? We've got some experience there that we were severely lacking. McFadden had come obviously back. And then the big one was Travis, wasn't it? Because we were talking about Travis in the summer and we were saying, would we let Travis go? Possibly. He wasn't really getting a game at Ipswich. I know they went up, but we were looking at it as he came back thinking almost a similar thing to Gallagher, other than the fact he played a lot more. I think maybe it's time to move on from him. Fortunately, we didn't.
Well, that was the thing. The Lewis Travis one did feel like a new signing, and looking at those first batch of games, where obviously Eustace then is now starting to impress a little bit more of what he wanted after having that relegation battle last year and surviving. And we was all a little bit unsure about Eustace, what we was going to get from him, and what we was really going to get out of these new players. I mean, we was frantically Googling Gay and Ohashi. You know, we'd heard different things, but we just didn't really know what we was going to get. And then the club starts with a 4-2 win against Derby. We then go into the EFL Cup and win 6-1 against Stockport County. And then a 2-2 draw against Norwich away. 2-1 win at home to Oxford, and then we get knocked out the EFL trophy against Blackpool 2-1 away. How was you feeling after that first batch looking at these players? Because I remember us talking about and thinking, well, Travis is a new player. Tronstad seems like he's a new player. And it seemed like Eustace had really galvanised the current squad. And then the new lads had come in and looked pretty energetic and sharp.
Yeah, I think in that, the opening game was the classic one, wasn't it? We went to Ewood not really knowing what to expect this season. People had tipped us for relegation. I think that was always a bit of a lazy thing for people to do. I think they looked at Rovers and saw that we stayed up on the last game of last season. Smodics is going to go. He scored 4 million goals for them last season. They're going to go down. That was. They looked no more into it than that. So, but I always felt that the truth was somewhere nearer the middle. So obviously we'd had the promotion, the playoff seasons, if you like, where we'd got 7th and 8th. And I just felt we would be somewhere mid-table. I think we talked about that. A good season will be upper, a poor season will be lower, but we didn't know what we were going to get on that opening day. And what we actually got, because if you going into that as well, we didn't know what style of football we were going to see. Last season, we saw John Eustace rocking up to every game with a do not lose. And I was like, right, clean slate, let's see what we get. And actually, we played some really good football, full of energy, full of desire to get forward and to score goals. And that was as much as anything for me. I actually saw a team that I thought, I can get behind this. I really can. I was really... Forget the results a little bit even. I was quite optimistic from what I'd seen in performances, really.
Yeah, we were seeing players playing with a little bit. It felt like a little bit more expansive. Yeah. It felt like that we had a plan B at times. At the time, the subs that he was making were always doing something positive, and that was the storyline of the start of the season for me. Was every change he made, it worked. And it was like, well, hang on, now we've got a manager that's willing to change it. He was making early subs when he needed to. And we seem to be getting the results. And obviously, we was going into the first derby of the season. And yes, okay, we got knocked out by Blackpool, and I'll come on to that one. But generally, the results were pretty solid results against some solid championship sides. You know, Oxford were no slouches. No. You know, so it was difficult games. Now with the EFL with the EFL Cup, I was a bit disappointed getting knocked out of that, because what that meant was that we really struggled to then rotate players and see what they had. Whilst it was nice to not have a cup that we was never going to win, and it's like, okay, we're out of that, let's just concentrate on the league. It did feel like the likes of Toth were just never going to get their opportunity to shine early. And that's what I really wanted to see. I wanted to see some of these new signings having an opportunity to play. So I was a bit disappointed about that result. But for the other ones, I was really, really impressed with. And then we go into that Dingles game, the first derby. And I remember feeling not positive necessarily, but not scared. And that's what I felt previously. I've gone into these games feeling a bit uneasy, feeling a bit scared. And I went into this one, and I remember us talking and just thinking, do you know what? This could be a game where we get something. Yeah. And, it was a draw, granted, but it felt like something had changed, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. I think some of that, if we're being perfectly honest, was because they just seemed to have a massive fire sale, didn't they, going into that game? And I think they played away at Sunderland and ended up making 8 or 9 changes before that. But I just felt like we had a team that I've never been able to get that 3-0 out of my head just because of the way we didn't turn up. That's not what I want from my team. Yeah, you never want to lose a game, but the way we were performed at Turf Moor that day under Thomason was pretty disgraceful. The way he set up was pretty disgraceful, and the way that they carried everything out was pretty disgraceful. But I couldn't see that in us. I just couldn't foresee that sort of performance again. I thought Eustace gets it, was part of that. I thought he sets us up in a way that we're not going to be naive going into the game. We're not going to be too expansive, but actually we'll have a go here. And that's exactly what he did, didn't he? I think Vyman had a shot after about 30 seconds where it nearly went in, and it really set the tone. The players gave a full-blooded effort. Owen Beck obviously had signed about a day before and ended up playing, and we'd never really seen him. And it was... Obviously, Dolan's goal should have counted, and it just felt like something was changing a little bit. Yeah,
because we made the odd mistake and we wasn't being punished for it. And that's when I started to think, do you know what? Last year we would have been punished for this. Like this silly little, giving the ball away at the back and missed chances, silly tackles. And Gay obviously got himself sent off. And you start to think to yourself, the year before, or even the year before that, that's the kind of games where, it goes, we start to get punished, and we weren't. And obviously Vyman's goal was unreal. I still love the fact that they were, you could hear the fans going, woo, just as it was, because they thought it was flying wide and it goes in. You could just hear them absolutely deflate. But it's taken who it was against out of it, it did feel to me like it was just a different vibe around the place. Not every mistake was going to be punished, so it wasn't going to be one of those seasons. And yes, it was a draw, but it did have that little bit of a feeling of victory about it.
Yeah, I think we also showed that we've got different ways of playing to us. So we obviously have Gay and Hashi at this point who are almost swapping, aren't they, game for game, one's playing then the next. And I know Gay got sent off, but that goal, the ping up to him, we hadn't been doing that, and it was needed at that point. Let's go a bit longer. Finally, we've got a striker that can win a ball in the air and wants to win a ball in the air. And then obviously the goal, it was unbelievable, the goal, wasn't it? But there was little facets of that to our game that I thought, Duru coming on and Carl McFadden on the touchline. There was all these little bits where you thought, this is a different squad. There's more to this. We can grind stuff out when we need to. Travis should have won it for us. And it was, following on from the Norwich game where Hashi scored late on, I just felt, we've more to us this season. We've more about us. We've different ways of playing, different ways from getting something from games.
Yeah, and we finished off this feast of form with another win, draw and win with a 3-0 against Bristol. It was the 0-0 against Preston, and then the 2-0 win against QPR. The Preston game obviously had the flashpoint with the bite and the sendings off, and Preston had their silly sending off, and then we got someone sent off, and it was a very naughty game. I was a little bit disappointed we didn't come away with the win on that one, but again, it was still a game that we came away with something. And then we go into the famine form of 2 losses, a win, draw, and then 3 losses again. And this is where people started to get a little bit worried again, because as fans, we are fickle. So it started with a very poor 3-0 away performance against Coventry. And then Plymouth just seems a place we really don't like to go. And we lost 2-1 there. We do get the 1-0 win at Swansea and the 0-0 at West Brom, which were 2 good results, but then the 1-0 loss at Watford, 2-0 against Sheffield United, which obviously isn't one that you can really, be too harsh on the lads about. But then you get the 2-0 loss at Stoke. Now, it's quite funny looking back at these results because they're very similar to results we get later on. Why do you think we started to have this drop in form? Do you think it was because we was playing this new expansive way and they got a little bit tired, or do you just think we'd run out of energy?
I think he would run out of energy. I think his lack of rotation going into a Tuesday night game away at Coventry and Saturday game, long trip to Plymouth, there wasn't much rotation from memory. There was the Gay suspension, so we didn't have the flexibility to rotate them. Leonard wasn't fit around this time. Pickering had picked a knock up. Becker then got suspended. And he was overplaying people for me. Whether that was because he didn't have faith in the others, but he overplayed them. I think the Coventry one really stood out at the time, didn't it? It was a different performance to one we've seen. But then for 60 minutes at Plymouth, it was the same. We followed it up with just didn't turn up. I think the rest of them were slightly different. I think we were take the Stoke one out of it. Before then, we were in games. Then you roll into the Stoke game, and I started to get a bit concerned there because I thought this is another midweek game. This was the point where we were getting up to almost a year of midweek games, and he still wasn't rotating. And I think we were having the discussion around before that. You've got to start rotating players before they get injured, before their form dips. Don't wait for that and then change it. Do it from a position of strength, and he just wouldn't do that, would he?
It's weird us talking about it, to be honest, because I'm now getting flashbacks of us having these conversations. It's quite nice, actually, to go through and doing what we're doing now, because I'm actually starting to relive and remember where I was and a little bit of my thought process at the time. And I can remember us talking about this and saying, this is why we needed depth. And I remember us putting something out on X and people commenting saying, well, we've got all these players and available, but Sigurdsson wasn't being trusted and apparently just had this constant cold and couldn't get himself ready. Like you said, there were some injuries. It seemed like Lewis Baker wasn't necessarily being trusted. And it was like, this is my formation. This is what I'm going with. And all these good things at the start about subbing early and making these changes, we started to realise, okay, well, that's good, but it doesn't work all the time. It's still a bit of a lottery. And not, even the best managers in the world can't get it right every single time with the subs. But I remember us talking about the likes of Hedges and players like this that we wanted to step up. Obviously, I was a big fan of Hedges last year and maybe the year before. And they weren't stepping up. And you could tell it was probably a trust issue. But it then clicks and we go into this next part of feast of form and we get 6 wins on the bounce. I think it was 6. And we managed to win at Cardiff away to start this run of form off. And it was a great performance. I think Lewis Baker got his goal and it was just really, really solid. Now, I know Cardiff ended up going on to get relegated, but they weren't any slouches. And it just kicks off. And then we go and get a 1-0 away win at Borough, a great place to go. 1-0 at home to Leeds, a brilliant result. 1-0 away at Hull, great results. 1-0 away at Sheffield Wednesday. And obviously, that's where Gay gets his first goal, I believe. I think it was his first league goal was there, which then kicked him on into some form. And then we get the 2-0 win at Luton. And it just seemed like a completely different Rovers again. And suddenly we're believing again.
Yeah, and it was almost overnight, wasn't it? So just to take everyone back, we'd had a run of games where we'd scored 1 goal against Swansea on the 19th of October, and we didn't score again until the 9th of November. And then at Cardiff, it was like watching Barcelona. That was one of the options for goal of the season, wasn't it? That lovely sweeping move, and we just played some really good football. I think Cantwell had started to get into the team at this point, started to get on the ball a bit more centrally. We went to Middlesbrough and we ground out a result. Obviously, it's offside, but not really bothered. We had Owen Beck playing on the left wing at this stage. That seemed like it was clicking. We beat Leeds at home. These were all good, deserved victories. Really ground them out, but with a bit of quality at the same time when it was needed. Hull, we've then gone and beat. We've gone away Sheffield Wednesday midweek. So we're starting to tick things off now that we've not done before. Winning midweek games. Going 1-0 up, holding that lead and looking quite comfortable. I remember us talking sometimes about us just shutting games down. We were breaking down things that we previously didn't recognise from Rovers, and we were starting to say, is this a new Rovers? And then obviously we go to Millwall and be Rovers.
And that's the thing. So this was the 21st of December now. We're in that festive period. I remember me and you talking podcast titles and stuff, and we was thinking, what should we call the podcast? And we were saying, the festive period, is it going to be good? All these little things that we're talking about. And I remember feeling really positive. Obviously, you're coming off the bounce of some really good results against very good teams with very good performances, exactly what you'd said. The noises, obviously, coming out from the owners about all this court case was, in its pomp at the time, but there was talk that actually we could go and do some business. So we're starting to feel positive. But the usual Rovers drop in form just started early, and we go and lose 1-0 at Millwall. We draw 2-2 at Sunderland, which is not a terrible result, but it's not exactly what we needed. We lose 1-0 at Hull. We draw at Leeds, which was a good result. And then we go into the derby against the Dingles again, and we lose that 1-0. So going into the new year, we're off 5 games without a win, and we're starting to think, right, we need some business. But there was nothing coming, and we could just see this tiredness. The writing was on the wall. Out of those results, okay, I think the Leeds one stands out, but we were feeling relatively negative.
Yeah, I think. Excuse me. I think the Sunderland one was one I enjoyed. I thought we played well. Then they, for 20 minutes, were one of the best teams I've seen at Ewood. But then we managed to get to grips with them. The Leeds one, to show that resilience, was great. But obviously, the key thing at that game really was that Ohashi got injured and was going to be out for a period of time. And that's the 1st of January. We've already been talking about how the players are knackered and we need some real good early business. And there's just none appearing, is there? And I think what happened here, as much as the results that were poor, fans' frustrations grew, because actually we could see that this was needed from December. Obviously, you can't bring them in then. The transfer window opens and we're like, please, Rovers, just be proactive. Please have these in. And the noises coming out are the same noises that we hear all the time of, well, it's difficult to get stuff done in January. We did do,
this is the thing. So, I remember us talking as well, saying, well, actually, we're now getting concerned about this squad and the quality of the squad, because other than maybe Travis and maybe Callum Britton at the time, we wasn't worried about losing any players, which is always a worry, because you should always be worried about losing someone. So we wasn't worried about losing anyone. The only ones that really went were actually later, like Sigurdsson, obviously, but he was a non-entity across the year, same with McFadden. But Lewis Baker was the main one to be recalled. And that caused a few issues, because he was starting to really get some game time. And we were starting to think, okay, well, the squad's now depleting that little bit more.
Yeah, they'd started to get knocks, hadn't they? So Travis did his knee at Millwall, and he was out for a while. So Baker had got in the team, and then Baker gets recalled out of nowhere. To be fair to us, we pulled Forshaw out of our rear very, very quickly to get him in, and I think he might have even come on at Oxford or played very quickly there. But Tronstad got injured at Oxford. It was a muscle injury. We had Pickering went out at this stage. We had a number of players that Ohashi was still out, Buckley wasn't getting a game, that we're looking at and thinking, if they're not going to play him when we need to start rotating the team, then get them out and get some other people in. And we just showed no signs of it, did we? And we didn't really bring anybody in. This is a massive congested period. So in January, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 games in January. And we didn't bring really anybody of note in until February. And when they did come through the door, Dennis and Cardboard were, particularly Dennis, hadn't played football for a year, had he? And Woodrow. And it wasn't enough. I think Sanderson was Forshaw and Sanderson were cover, but were decent decisions and quite quick business. I don't think we could fault that. That sort of filled a gap and did a job. But yeah, there wasn't enough of it and it wasn't quick enough. I appreciate it's difficult, but we needed it earlier. And I think that period there, had we have had some reinforcements, I do think it would have had an impact later on in the season as well. I think we would have been able to rotate a bit more. You know, Owen Beck, for example, his injury came because he was overplayed. And Travis and Tronstad, it took them a long time to recover from those injuries.
And you can see that with the form. You know, when you look back and you look at the form, you can see when the players actually started to get themselves back into the kind of fitness that you need for this level. Because you look at the signings we made. So you've got Cargbo, my mate Eustace anyway. He's come in for an actual fee. And again, we didn't know anything about him. And we saw him a couple of times later on in the window, which we'll get to. But Ribeiro comes in on a free a bit late. Forshaw, like you say, was a straight in. Same with Dion Sanderson. Again, they're not exactly ones to blow your skirt up and make you all excited. Emmanuel Dennis was one that we were a little bit more excited about, but like you say, hadn't played. And Corley Woodrow was just a bit more of it felt very much like a panic. So a window where we felt like we needed to push on was a window that, you know, didn't deliver in regards to the transfers, because across this period in January, we'd drawn 1-1 at Leeds, we'd lost 1-0 to the Dingles, we did win at Borough in the FA Cup, but we won 3-0 against Portsmouth, which I remember being quite a good performance. But then we lose to Oxford, we lose to Coventry, we lose to Bristol. And even though we did end January with a 2-1 win against Preston, it did just have this very negative feeling, because what was going on the pitch, the performances weren't necessarily there, and that's what we wanted. I remember us keep saying, we just need some good performances. We need to see what players are actually coming in and doing their job. But it just felt like a lot of players dead on their feet, just trying their best to keep things going. And then when the window ends and you're seeing some of the names that are there, when we seemed to be promised that we was going to get some money. We'd had all this money come in, you know, from Wharton leaving, you know, because, I mean, Wharton had left, obviously, us with quite a bit of money. Same with, we're talking about Raya's money, we're talking about, obviously, Schmodik's money, and it was all going into the running of the club. We had people messaging us saying that we didn't know what we was talking about on this podcast about finances and so on and so forth. I just remember this part of the year then just went massively toxic in the fan base.
Yeah, well, we brought in cover, hadn't we? And we replaced Baker. We'd not really improved the squad at all. And then Cardboard didn't. I remember him being announced at the Preston game. So that's the 31st of January. We'd had 8 games that players could have been impacting. It wasn't good enough. I know it's difficult in January. I appreciate that, but it wasn't good enough, was it? There was obviously the one protracted chase of Thomas Asante. There was rumoured interest in Patrick Bamford, who then got injured out against us, ironically. And it just wasn't. It felt we were wasting an opportunity again. Yeah.
Yeah, and we finish the window. We go into an away game against QPR. We lose that 2-1. And then we're starting to hear noises that Eustace is being touted of leaving. We'd heard little things across the season about different clubs, but this one seemed to get a lot of traction. I believe the Friday before the FA Cup game against Wolves, he was contacted, even though he denied that was it. And then let's slip it was the case. We play against Wolves. It wasn't a fantastic performance. It wasn't terrible. Eustace comes on. I'm not going to say surname anymore. And looked pretty strong for us. He did this funny little stride thing to get himself like he was revving the engine. But we started to see some glimpses, and we're like, okay, you know, they've got some players that are just absolute next level, and I think Toth made not an error necessarily, but could have done better with the goals. But generally, the whole noise then was about Eustace, and then bang, he's gone. And we're just like, right, this now has turned into this drama, this storyline. It felt like an episode of EastEnders or Coronation Street, whichever, where you've got a manager leaving to go to, from a footballing sense, a lot of people said it was a worse situation. Some people saying it was a better situation from an owner's sense. From a personal sense, they were saying, well, he lives around the corner. Whatever, he'd left. We had no plan. It seemed like we had no one ready necessarily. And David Lowe is having to step in, the absolute hero that he is. But this really kicked off a massive toxic period of fans, protests. The owners just were getting pelters. The court case wasn't getting sorted. It was a pretty horrible time off the pitch, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was summed up extremely well there, Mike, but it was extremely grim. It was. I think what really hurt people was we felt like it was another missed opportunity. And you're thinking, how many of these can we have? And I think we looked at Eustace and looked at the team and had something we could really identify with, people getting the maximum out of what they were capable of. And they just needed some help. And we were hearing from Eustace again, like we had from Thomason, like we had from Mowbray. They need some help. And they weren't getting it. And we felt let down for the players, let down for Eustace. Then there was the big split in, is Eustace a snake? Actually, if he's willing to go somewhere else when he's in, we were 5th, I think, in the league. What is that saying about the club? He knows it better than us. All the things we suspect must be true. The club must be toxic. It must be broken from the inside out. And it just spiraled, didn't it? And it was made a million times worse the next month. But that period of time, actually, if you look at the West Brom game, for example, ironically, that's one of the proudest moments I've had of them all season. So in such an absolute mess, I remember that West Brom game, them doing a huddle before the game, and it felt like Lewis Travis had taken the whole club on his shoulders and was like, no, I'm not having this. We've worked too hard for this. And I don't think I've ever been prouder of 11, 12, 13 players, whatever they were on the pitch at the time, in an absolute mess for a manager that they really, really cared about. I mean, technically, Eustace was still a manager, wasn't he, at this point? But him and his cronies, number 1 and number 2, were on gardening leave for the game, which was just...
Yeah, Lowe takes over, Gay gets his goals, but it wasn't just that. We were solid. I mean, we had a couple of decisions go our way as well, if I'm being absolutely honest. When it came to the other end, I think they should have had a goal that was ruled a foul. But it felt like as fans we deserved it. As fans we deserved it. With everything that had been going on, we deserved a game like this, to be able to have this midweek game. You know, a difficult place to go. It was clicking for Gay. It was Travis just being Travis, and it was just great to have that moment. And it was followed up with a good 2-0 performance against Plymouth as well. So it felt good. And then we're starting to hear about, you know, some names like Gary O'Neill, and we're starting to hear things about what he'd said and the promises that the owners couldn't make and the ones that they were making, and so on. But it's actually Ishmael then that comes in after this 3-0 loss to Swansea. We tried to remain positive. We had a conversation when obviously this all happened, and we tried to remain positive. We were looking into his stats. We were looking at where he'd been, what he'd done, and it was pretty obvious that he liked these young, fast, high-energy players that we just didn't have. I remember us being concerned, but we did try to remain positive. But people just weren't happy, were they, with this appointment in the majority?
No, I think it had all snowballed from the transfer window, hadn't it? And then those people thinking, well, Eustace knows the club better than anyone, and if he's willing to go to somebody in the relegation zone, what is it saying about the club? And people wanted somebody they could really get behind. But we talked about how often does that actually happen? How often does a manager come in, particularly in the Championship? But have we had from day one that you go, wow, really happy with that appointment. But it also felt like we were wasting the opportunity in January. Don't waste it now, because by some miracle we were still where we were. So the debate really between the fan base was actually, do we just go really short term with this and get somebody to do a job? Do we get David Law to carry it ticking over? Or do we follow a similar route to what we've taken? And obviously that's what
just to interrupt you there, because I remember you telling me what David Lowe's job was and why you thought that wouldn't work. Do you want to remind us what you said about what David Lowe's job was?
Yeah, so Eustace had obviously come in, and David Law had been quite a key first-team coach. Eustace had his trusted sidekicks, and David Law was not relegated, but he was moved aside to become an opposition scout, essentially. So he would watch the opposition and come up with 2 or 3 key things that they did to build up from the back, 2 or 3 things that they did in the way they pressed. You know, he was looking at those details. So he wasn't actually even on the grass. So when people were talking about the continuity, from a player's perspective, the continuity would not have been there in terms of they weren't going to be getting the same sessions. Yes, he knew what had been going on, but Damien Johnson was the technical, I think he's head of technical development or something along those lines. Basically, he does a lot of the analysis with the players and looks at what they're doing well, what they're not doing, what they need to build on in quite a video analysis way, or was what he was doing. So the players have lost all sense of, Eustace took a lot of the sessions himself. Matt Gardner really did, and Keith Downing. They were all very hands-on, but it was basically them 3 on the training pitch. Law wasn't. He might be taking a couple of the other sessions, but not, so it wasn't like you were passing it over to your right-hand man to just carry on what you were doing. And I felt it worked in the short term, but I think that was as much the players not ticking over. That's disrespectful, but I think it was as much driven from the players as it was David Law, really.
Yeah, and like you said, I mean, it's then a part of the role which is very important that then is taken away, because if he's scouting opposition, he was obviously very good at it. If you're then taking that away, that's something that we lose, and you could tell that then with the form that we go through. Then I think it ends up being 8 games without a win. So Ishmael comes in. It's a 1-1 draw against Norwich. We snatched the game at the end, I believe. Is that the one where we draw the end? Is that the one where Vyman injures himself in the celebration?
So that's the game where Dennis gets sent off. Vyman scores, jumps up to celebrate in the corner and does his knee, and he's out for the season. So you've lost 2 players there. Tronstad was just making his return. It might have actually been his first game back. Came on for about half an hour. But Travis, if you remember, he was driving through games, but he wasn't quite like he had been, was he?
They seemed very lethargic, very like misdirection, wasn't it?
Yeah, obviously Pickering was out, Beck was out, Ribeiro had slotted in, fortunately, really, really well. But we were lacking at this point. We really were. In options, and we weren't mixing it around again. We then go into the Derby game, which was a mess. Yeah. And you've got Dennis suspended. You've got Vyman out injured. You will remember that Cardball, after 15 minutes, goes off with a hamstring. So he's then out for 6 weeks. And it just went from bad to worse. I remember Tronstad and Travis looking like they'd never played football together. And it was poor, wasn't it? Let's not try and even remotely dress that one up. Yeah,
that was. I mean, I know we talk about worst moment of the season. This is going to be in our awards. For me, it was a low point. That was a real low point, because as much as we appreciated the fact that Eustace would have a lot of inside information against us and would know, it just felt like a real low point, and it just got worse. We go and lose 1-0 at Stoke, lose 2-1 at Cardiff, lose 1-0 at Portsmouth, and these feel really recent now. We're talking about them, but these are very poor sides.
They are, but again, to be fair, when you look at the context of it, so if you remember against Derby as well, turned out after the game that Britain was injured. We went to Stoke, and that Travis and Tronstad were poor again. Sanderson came on. I think that's the game that Campbell was getting kicked from pillar to post, but equally was awful. Bordering on a disgrace in terms of his effort. It's the only time I could really question him. We then go into Cardiff because Sanderson really struggled, didn't he? So Cardiff, Rankin Costello comes back into the team, and Dennis plays 60 odd minutes, but then does his hamstring. So you've now lost Cardboard and Dennis. They've gone. Owen Beck's obviously still out at this point. We go to Portsmouth. Owen Beck reappears. And you're thinking, finally, players are coming back. Hayden Carter slots in at right back because Danny Bart's been out injured at this point. Bart comes back in for his first game. You're going to slowly introduce him. Carter moves to right back to cover for Britain. Is off injured after 70 minutes. Tronstad and Travis, that's the game I remember them being absolutely appalling and looking like they'd never played together. And Owen Beck went off after 12 minutes. That's his season done. So we were losing two big players every game, really, at this point.
I remember across the season, we talked about the strength and conditioning at Rovers.
Yeah.
And generally how we're preparing players. And we got pelters for it because people are saying, well, you know, it's a depth thing and stuff. And it's like, it was all the things that we talked about. But other clubs are in similar situations to this, where they have squads with similar numbers, but yet they seem to make it work. But at the time, I remember looking at some of the injuries that other clubs were having, and ours just seemed to be more. It was like a constant. I mean, the physios must, you know, they can't have had a day off for us because it was just constant. I remember us questioning the strength and conditioning, thinking, how are we preparing these players? Is it the way we're playing them? Is it that we're not preparing them? Is it the lack of depth? Is it the rotation? There was so much that we were talking about, but it just seemed like it was constant.
So I've had a real. That's what I've basically spent my weekend looking at, and people like Danny Bart shouldn't have been playing the amount of football he did. When you look at the majority of our injuries, we have a couple of contact ones. We had the Travis one that was his knee that was. Probably you can discount that one, but the majority of them were when players either came back too early because we were short, or were after they played too many games. I mean, Owen Beck was the one that screamed out to me. Owen Beck has never played that much football and needed a rest. Ohashi, I know he did his ankle, but Ohashi's played a season and a half at the point where he gets injured. That's got to contribute to his injury where he goes over on his ankle. You know,
Danny Bart started this year, and there was no way that we expected him to start 34 games.
No, and he shouldn't have been doing, should he? He shouldn't. But I looked at, I really thought Eustace did a good job. But when you look at it, part of management is managing the squad. Now, Park, whether he trusts them or not, it's no good. John Buckley, let's say, and Lewis Baker. If he doesn't think they're good enough, well, it's a very, very risky game to not rest Travis and Tronstad at all, because then if they're not good enough, you might all of a sudden have to play them for a number of games, and that's exactly what happened. Same with Pickering, same with Beck, same with Bart, same with Britton, and then obviously Dennis and Cardboard were just rushed into football. That's what happened with them.
It's quite interesting us talking about this now because I'm just looking at the amount of minutes played. Now, everyone obviously knows that Dom Hyam played absolutely every minute and fair play to him. Yeah. But taking pairs out of it, next is Travis playing the most minutes, and he had his injury issues. Next was Dolan, which, to be fair, he did play a lot. Then it was Tronstad and then Danny Bart. And you know, these are positions. So for me, centre mid is one of the most difficult, physically one of the most difficult positions on the pitch, if not the most difficult position on the pitch physically, because of just the amount of running, scanning, sideways movement, going back, going forward, just everything about it. And you've got two players there that played a hell of a lot of minutes. So that's a red flag for me. And then you've got a 34-year-old. that's near, up there. If these were like mid-20s, I can understand, but it just highlighted a lot, and we ended up having this real bad run of form, and it was because of injuries and so on. But it felt like it was we still was always in with a shout of making playoffs, so the hope was always there. And then after that Portsmouth game, we lose 2-0 away at Middlesbrough. We get that draw at Sheffield Wednesday. Now I wanted to talk about the Sheffield Wednesday game because I remember. Because this was the one we was 2-0 down. We came back to draw 2-2, but we could have nicked it. And I remember talking after this game to you, and we said that when we got that equaliser, that changed something. I think that triggered something with the lads because everything just come against them throughout this period. We just couldn't buy a win. Everything was going against us. And this Sheffield Wednesday game, we huffed and we puffed. We kept going, and we got the rewards. And I think because we'd got that goal, Ewood erupted. Yes, we went nearly to nick the game, but that draw just felt like it was something different. And I remember so happy that they just got something out of that game after all this effort, because Ewood felt different after that.
Yeah, and I think if you look at the manager, he came in trying not to change much against Norwich. You roll into then a period of time where we go to Derby and we get exposed. Stoke, Cardiff, Portsmouth. He's picking injuries up. We're talking about Gay being isolated. We play Middlesbrough at home. Absolutely just look like we've got nothing in the tank. And at Sheffield Wednesday at half-time, he's getting pelters, isn't he? People are singing that they want him to get sent off. They're saying that, the fans are just absolutely lost it. And rightly so, because the place was just imploding. I also think there's a little bit of Valerian Ismail at half-time that's gone, actually, I know I've said I'll come in and not change things, but if I'm gonna go out, I'm gonna go out on my sword. And I think it was a big game for him as well, personally, because he went at Sheffield Wednesday, didn't he? He did change the way we were playing. He went a little bit gung-ho, and we got something from the game, and he's seen the crowd react. And I think he's thought, actually, I need to be true to myself here. And then they go to Luton, and it was a strange game, Luton, wasn't it? Because Luton they needed a win, and yet they looked like there was nothing on the game. But we were playing differently that day. I remember us trying to nick the ball, not all out gegenpress, but we were trying to nick the ball further up the pitch. Hedges nicks the ball off them, lays in Ohashi, goal. We tightened back up. We looked back to what we could do, and we shut the game down. And I thought, hold on a minute. Toth's obviously come in as well. I think he's made a point here. Sheffield Wednesday, I remember Pears being questioned again, and I think he's gone, right, I've had enough of this. I'm having a look at Toth at the very least, or I'm hearing that Toth is going to be the better of the two. I'm putting him in. I'm going to go the way I think is right now. And I think the players probably... We talked about him coming in, didn't we, and being a stepdad, and the players going, well, nothing's wrong with the way we're doing it. Who are you to tell me what to do? Or this kind of thing. I think that all bets were off at this point. And I think it's galvanised them a little bit as well. And I think they thought, yeah, do you know what? This might work as well. The Luton one to follow it up was massive. If you draw against Sheffield Wednesday coming back and you go and lose again, it just carries on imploding. But we go and get the win. Then obviously we roll into Millwall, and we played one of the best performances of the season. And I think these are really big moments for next season. I know we're talking about this one, but I think these are moments that make people go, oh, actually, maybe there is another way of doing this.
There's a glimpse. There's a glimpse of the future and what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah. And I think it gives him probably some gravitas on the training ground, because we know what people are like. We're the same as fans, but players will be the same. They'll be on the training ground. Go on then. You show me what you can do. And actually, I think they've started to see that something they can potentially believe in here.
Yeah, and I completely agree. I mean, the Luton game was, it felt like a little bit of a smash and grab. We're down to 10 men, and the performance wasn't fantastic, but it was solid. Luton were pretty poor, and the fans were then starting to think, okay, maybe there's something here. It's maybe the lads are just finishing off the season. They look a little bit on the beach, but they're just whatever. The Millwall game happens, and you're like, well, hang on, there's something here. Are we believing? And then we've got 3 games then where you just think to yourself, okay, for whatever reason he's put Toth in, he's rolling with Toth, that's great. But generally the side now is starting to look a little bit more. Rohashi is the kind of player that he wants over Gay, but generally you could see the kind of players that he wanted to play. And we go and get the 1-0 win against a very poor Sunderland. We get the 2-1 against Watford, and suddenly we're dreaming. And everyone's, we start to then get messages, people saying, oh, you're forgetting all the, where's these Venkys out brigade and stuff. And it was, well, no, it's still there. It's just we're always trying to concentrate on the football and be positive. And that last day of the season to have something to play for was amazing, wasn't it?
Yeah, and it felt, it's nice to be thinking about football again. The stuff going on in the background has always been there for 15 years, if we're being honest. It's never far from the surface. But yeah, it was lovely to be finally looking at just forgetting something, putting it to the back of your mind and going, do you know what, this could happen. And I think the Luton game, we started going, it was kind of half joking, wasn't it? Yeah, well, we might do it, knowing full well we wouldn't. Millwall, the performance was excellent, but we were still a million miles off it. Sunderland, now I've started to go, well, hold on, actually. We start putting another result together. And if you remember, at the same time, all the teams around us decided that they didn't want to get in the playoffs either. So, if any of them had put a real run together or a half-decent run, we wouldn't have had a chance anyway. But you just start to think this season's been so bonkers. This would be the most bonkers way to finish it off.
And it didn't happen. It was close. We believed for 9 minutes when we was in 5th position, but the season ends. We're in 7th position. We've changed manager once. It was better than predicted. Looking back now, after that review, do you think 7th was about right for us? I mean, you've always said the league never lies. Yeah. But for me, I probably think we've overachieved this year. But where are you sitting with it?
Yeah. In terms of being 7th, we were close to the playoffs. But I think if you look at the points gained, that's where I'm at with it. I think the points gained, we weren't as good as the Thomason team. It wasn't as good a season as that. Wasn't as good a season as the Mowbray team. And I think the number of points gained was what actually tells me what I needed to know. It wasn't a horrific season by any stretch. It was a better season, probably the best season we could hope for in terms of, we were talking about if we have a really good season, we'll be upper mid-table. And that's exactly where we got. Points-wise, most seasons we will probably have finished about 10th with the number of points we got. And that would have been about right. I think that would have felt right. I just think there's been a lot of poor teams around us. There's been a lot of poor teams. There was times where we were having horrific runs and you're looking and going, we're still in the playoffs. What is going on? Whereas the season under Mowbray that time, when we were top of the league for a bit, then we were 2nd, we fell off a cliff, but we just dropped. We would have been in the playoffs this season on that one. And
I think generally, top 2 aside or top 3 aside, it's been a pretty poor league this year. Yeah. And you have got to take advantage of this. And this is why we got frustrated after that January window, because we could all see what was happening. We could all see what we needed. We could see what was happening around the league. And it was a fantastic opportunity to really push on, because these don't happen very often. You look about when Leicester won the Premier League, 9 times out of 10 that wouldn't have happened, but they took advantage of a season where everyone else was playing poor, and you've got to do the same in these situations. And I think that's why we became frustrated. I mean, to go back to me saying about we overachieved, and before people give me pelters saying, well, if we'd just done this, this, and this, we would have been in the playoffs. Well, yeah, if my auntie had balls, she'd be my uncle. It didn't happen. And it didn't happen for a reason, because we didn't have the players. You look at the transfers, the players that left, as much as I gave Sam Gallagher pelters, it was a risk to get rid of a striker and bring in, Gay, Hashi. We'll get into whether that was successful in a minute. You've lost Schmodix, who, like you say, was scoring so many goals for us and single-handedly kept us up, last season. So to have all of this happen, then look at the players that have come in, which were risky signings. Then you see what happened in January. It was a good season. We didn't expect to be here. Everything, all things considered, looking at the squad we already had, looking at the squad that we finished with, the fact that we didn't bring in many of our youth players, so you are relying on some old heads. And we'll get into the rankings in a minute, but a lot of the players didn't perform as well. So we was relying on a very small handful of players to keep us up there. So to finish 7th, actually, right now, after, to looking back, I'm pretty proud of the lads for getting us there, because I genuinely, in my heart of hearts, thought we would be staring at relegation battle this year and maybe finishing around the 15th, 16th mark. That was my vibe.
Yeah. I was more mid-table. I was. But I look back at the season and I think Eustace performed better than I thought he would do. And then obviously it fell off a cliff. There's been moments this season that have been better than I probably expected or hoped we could have. But then there's been moments lower. And I think that the fact that we've called this one what we've called it is absolutely apt, because that's what it's felt like, hasn't it? It hasn't been a dull season. It hasn't been a bumbling along. There's been periods of real highs and then periods of some of the lowest things that we've experienced. Some elements of this season have been lower than last season, and yet we nearly went down last season. I've had less faith in certain bits of the club this season than I did last season, which seems bonkers when you look where we finished. But all in all, I think it's about right in terms of the points we've got. I think the fact that we finished 7th is a reflection on the league more than us. I think we're finishing around 10th would have been about right. I think we've lacked some quality, we've lacked depth, and we have lacked rotation in the squad, whether that's through, quality and not trusting them or whatever. And I think that's cost us at times. And they're quite clear things moving into next season to change. What I do think is that they are fixable things. I do think they are fixable. I don't think it needs open heart surgery like we talked about last season. I think what me and you were having a chat about, what do we need this going into the season? We were saying the spine of the team needs changing, and that's massive surgery. I don't feel that's the case, but I do feel there's some things that can be fixed that need to be. Once again, we will be decided by our recruitment and when it comes in and how quick it comes in. And I think this season that ultimately has cost us.
Yeah, because I've been disappointed with some elements of the team. The fact that we haven't had anyone score double figures. We've had no one give double figures in assists or anything like that. So it's nice in one way that, you're not relying on one person like we did with Schmodix. But on the flip side, you do want someone to step up, like you said a couple of times. Ohashi had a very long season when you take his Japanese exploits into it as well. So I think the future's bright with a lot of players. I think there's a base there to work on. I have a lot of faith. I mean, I put a tweet out an X post out the other day, and I said that my bold prediction is next year we'll finish top 6.
I saw that.
And I'm not at the time. I kind of believe it, and the reason I believe it is I've got to believe it. I've got to have that faith. I've had enough of looking at the squad and just thinking, oh well, we need this, we need that, and when you finish the season off as we did, I'd prefer to finish the season strong and not make it than to have been third or fourth and drop out due to the lack of form. We had that lack of form. We came back, and then we've had this push when everyone thought it was all gone, and we nearly made it. And I think that adds some positivity. You're seeing the lads going away with Lewis Travis now. He's dressed as a air stewardess, and you can just see there's a camaraderie there, and there's a lot that needs to be sorted, which we'll talk about next week. But I think just looking back now, talking it through with you, I just think it was a season that we can look back on and say, is it a missed opportunity? Of course it is, but it was still a good season.
Yeah, I think ultimately I don't think people can say it wasn't a good season. I think you hit the nail on the head there, though. I think because we've now got a different manager, as we had Eustace, I might have felt differently, I don't know. But having a new manager coming in, ending the season the way we did, and it not being the other way around is massive. Absolutely massive.
It's just a psychological difference, isn't it?
Yeah, going into the summer and going into next season. Loads of things that I want to talk about next week in terms of what needs to be fixed. But one thing that you couldn't have fixed at the end of the season is the results. And the fact that we have got that real positive, sounds daft, but a positive end to the season in some ways has really, really been beneficial. I think, I think going into next season, actually, the biggest thing that could have happened has just happened. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Should we start rating some players?
Let's go.
So, I have got them in a kind of order of the ones which I felt played quite well. And it goes down to the ones that I feel like either didn't play that well or didn't really have the opportunity to play well. So we're going to start with the one which I felt had potentially the best season, and that's Callum Britton. So how would you rate Callum Britton?
I think Callum Britton has performed far better than I expected him to. I think he's actually taken his game to a level that I've not seen a better right back in the Championship this season. And I didn't think he had that in him. I was not sure who was the better of the two out of him and Rankin Costello at times since he's been at the club. And now there is absolutely no doubt. And I think the fact that we have gone from talking about Callum Britton as he's probably the person who should start, to now being, I could see him leaving, says all you need to know. Yeah. I think he's been crucial in defence, but he's been crucial going forward. He's really important to the way we play football now.
Well, I always championed him and Ryan Hedges, and one of them let me down and one of them hasn't. So Callum Britton's my new man crush when it comes to football. I think he's been massive for us. I mean, if I was to give him an out of 10, I'd give him a 9 out of 10 in my opinion. There was games where there was the odd game where you could just tell he was tired and not at it, because we just the way he plays his game. And that's where you do need that rotation. And I'm going to get to the person that is his cover in a minute. But the person that covered him wasn't exactly doing the job. But I thought Callum Britton had a fantastic season. The next one I've got on my list is Danny Bart. Now, for me, Danny Bart, he's, we'll talk about our awards in a minute about who played better than expected, but he was definitely one for me to, in that conversation, because I didn't expect him to play how he did.
No, I thought him coming into the club was more about his experience and his know-how and maybe cover, almost similar to McFadden last season. I know McFadden re-signed, but I thought actually he's younger, obviously, but he's probably just a bit of an upgraded version of McFadden for the squad. I didn't really expect him to play that much. Thought he might step in when needed. He might be when we got to a 3 at the back or the odd game for cover. But as it turned out, I think he was incredibly important to our season. Yeah.
And where would you put Hyam in relation to that?
I mean, Dom Hyam, the fact he's played every minute of the season deserves a massive amount of respect. I've said numerous times now, I think Dom Hyam, it's not his fault, but when he's played on the left-hand side, he finds it massive. There's a massive drop-off in his performance. So if you're playing him on the right-hand side, so I think when we played him on the right-hand side, he's had a very, very good season. He's looked a good centre-half, but I do think that coincides with him being alongside a main man. And I think him and Carter over the course of the season have shown to me that they are a number 2 centre-back. And by that, I mean, like Liverpool talk about all the time, without Van Dijk, the other person doesn't look anywhere near as good. And I think you need a main man next to either of them. With the main man, I think Dom Hyam's had a really, really good season. I mean, playing every minute is an outstanding achievement.
Massive. And it shows the professional that he is, that he's done that. He was someone that was player of the year. We were talking about him being a fantastic servant of the club, future captain, all of this. Then he started to drop away and people have started to question him. He had that horrendous game at Bristol last year and people are then starting to question, is he actually the future? And it's great because whilst I don't feel like he had any games where he was like, oh my God, he's absolutely outstanding, what a player. He was just that middle of the road, at worst he was a 6 out of 10. But he was your 7 and 8 and very similar to like what you've said about Harry Pickering in the past. Another player that I've kind of put in this echelon, and he only played 6 games, but it was Toth. Now, Toth for me is the future number 1 for next season. You could just tell that the likes of Hyam trust him, the likes of Danny Bart trust him. He's got something about him. Yes, there's the odd mistake, but this is the EFL. This is what happens. I've had plenty of conversations with people on X about it. You can't expect perfection. If you're expecting perfection, they're not going to be in the EFL. They're not going to be playing for Blackburn Rovers. That's just the long and short of it. So you've got to have an expectation that there's going to be certain things, but he made a cracking save onto the bar against Luton. You could just tell he has way more confidence in himself. So yeah, I was quite impressed. Would you say that Toth going into next season, assuming we don't sign anyone, would be the number 1?
Nailed on for me. I think finally I've got a goalkeeper that I don't worry about. I don't think he's going to be a Brad Friedel, but who the bloody hell is? I think he's going to be a 7 out of 10. He'll save most of what he should save, but similar to Kaminski, he'll save most of what he should save, and he'll pull off the odd really, really good save, but he's not going to be as erratic as Pears. And for me, I want my goalkeeper to be boring, a bit like a referee. The less I see of them in many, if you come away talking about a keeper, either something's wrong with the game or something's wrong with the keeper. I kind of want, I'm really sorry, Mike, because I know this is your position, but I kind of want my keeper to be blending in the background and I don't worry about them. I don't think about them that much. Because like I said, otherwise, right, something's going wrong with the team, that they're being overworked, or they're having a shocker, aren't they? And I felt uncomfortable with Ainsley Pears since he's been in the team. I have.
You're 100% right. If a goalkeeper only has to do a job if someone else has done theirs wrong, in general, okay, you can build from the back, but in general, yeah, the goalkeeper's a last line of defence for a reason. So no, I completely agree. I mean, while we're talking about goalkeepers, for me, Pears didn't have a terrible season. No. He probably played above my expectations, and this sounds really harsh, but that's because my expectations were relatively low. I mean, he had this run of form that was fantastic, and people then talking he's being linked to Man United crazily. But then there's questions of, okay, well, Pears is the future. He's doing a lot, but then he the form is temporary, class is permanent. Comments came into it, and it's like it did seem like it was more form than anything else. And whilst he didn't do anything amazing, you could just see there was a few little errors coming in, and that they weren't being punished, but there was just a few little things that just made me that little bit uneasy. And without fully breaking down with video and going through everything, it's really hard to articulate. But there was just something not settling right from probably halfway through the season onwards for me, and it was all in keeping with the rest of the form of the team. I get that,
yeah.
But for me, Toth just showed that little bit more.
Yeah, I'd had enough of Pears last season. I thought that the game against Sheffield Wednesday, I didn't think he'd recover from. So the fact he did, and the fact that he performed as well as he did, absolutely exceeded my expectations. But very similar to you, that's because my expectations were, I think of him as a 5, 6 out of 10 every week. And I think he overperformed, and he was probably only a 7 out of 10. He was making a mistake almost every game by January, February onwards. They weren't always being punished, like you said, but I'm ready to move on from him as a Pears, and I have been for 2 years, though. I think he's had a good season, but that's comparative to what I was expecting, I'll be honest.
Yeah. And what do you think of Hayden Carter? Obviously, he had his injury issues. He came back and then he got injured again. What was your feelings on him?
I've been very disappointed. I think Hayden Carter's ceiling's really high. I think he's got all the natural attributes that you can't give to somebody for a centre-half. He's strong, he's athletic, he's quite quick. He's quite good on the ball. We saw what he did against Derby on the first game of the season. He is pretty good going forward. But he's 25 now, and he needed to kick on for me. He needed to be the main man this year. And actually, he's dropped into probably my third choice centre-half, which for me is massive because I think I really, really rate Hayden Carter. But right now, I wouldn't, if we were playing tomorrow, it'd be Bath and Heim for me.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think Carter's definitely got that future with us. But there's definitely an element of he does need to kick on at this age. He's got the experience now, and I want to see him kick on. But I do think he will. You could tell that Ishmael, he's going to play the kind of game that Ishmael plays. I've got a lot of faith that Carter's going to kick on. Now, we've got 3 left-backs to talk about. We've got Pickering, Ribeiro and Beck. Now, Pickering and Ribeiro, Pickering played 12 games. Ribeiro crazily played 15. So they tended to be a little bit, more back up to Beck in the end of the season, wasn't it?
Well, Pickering started the season, didn't he? And I actually thought Pickering was having, and I think this has been forgotten a little bit because it was right early on. Pickering was playing really well. We were playing well early on in the season, and he was central to that. I think he's always been a 7 out of 10, and actually, I think he was 8 out of 10 in some of these games. I thought he was really playing well. Him and Callum Britton were looking a good pair. His injury concerned me, but then Beck came in and that alleviated those concerns. I still think our best pairing before Ribeiro walked through the door was actually to have Pickering at left back and to have Beck at the left wing. But that's not a slight on Beck. It's just because I just think that worked really well. But Ribeiro came in and he was probably, I would say, I know we're doing awards in a minute, but almost surprise of the season in some ways. He just came in, slotted in and looked like he'd been there forever. It wasn't 9, 10 out of 10. He was just steady Eddie, really committed, looked like he played all the time. Massive bonus, that was. Massive bonus.
Yeah, and obviously Beck was playing left back, he was playing left wing, and he just looked a talent. I didn't know what to expect from him. For a loan, he's relatively old at 22. But, he was thrown in the deep end, like you're saying, in a big, East Lancashire derby, and he just settled in beautifully.
Yeah, I think he's one of them that it helps the fact of who we were playing on his debut and that he had a good game. But you just can't help but love him, can you? I think Rovers fans have this weird obsession with left backs anyway. I remember Callum Davidson getting, I think he might have got player of the year once. Derek Williams did. I think we appreciate a left back more than any other club I've ever met. But Owen Beck's got all those qualities you want to see, hasn't he? He's got that little bit of bite about him, pardon the pun. But he's full of energy. He's a little bit of a lovable rogue at times. He seems quite a quiet lad off the pitch, but on the pitch, he's up for having a scrap with anyone. And I'd love to see him come back.
I remember the only thing that irritated me about him was he just pulls the shirts too many times.
Yeah,
he's the yellow card waiting to happen.
Oh, yeah.
It was the one thing I was just thinking, the one thing I'd like to say to him is, I just stop pulling shirts.
Yeah. He did make his way onto my weekly bet builder of rotation between him, Carter and Travis for nailed on booking. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's a perfect segue because I want to talk about now Travis and Tronstad as a pair. We talked about them loads about a pairing. It was similar to when we were talking about Hyman Carter last year as the pairing. This one now was Tronstad and Travis. They just played so well together, and it was really surprising because Travis was one that we was quite happy to let go at one point because he just didn't seem to be kicking on. He wasn't getting on with JDT. He didn't seem to really offer anything other than just being a bit of a shithouse. And then Tronstad as a signing, he wasn't really offering much. We didn't know. I mean, he was someone that came with a little bit of street cred. You know, he played at a decent level. He got quite a few appearances, and they didn't seem to really offer much. And then they start the season, and suddenly it was like the two players that we were just desperate to have.
Oh, they were so well matched to each other, weren't they? I've worried about Tronstad's mobility, and I've worried about his ability to cover certain elements of the pitch at times when he was playing in the single pivot. But then Travis, sometimes you worry about him positionally, and they just balanced out each other's weaknesses and strengths perfectly. And I don't know which one I love more right now. And my biggest concern with them, and I would trying not to get into all of this, but is the fact that the pair of them have 12 months left on their contract, because they are integral to this team. They almost became a problem in some senses because you just couldn't take them out of the team, and we didn't, and that's obviously led to their injury. But they were just so crucial, weren't they? They were massive for us, absolutely massive.
Yeah, huge. And like you said earlier, when they lost their form or when they didn't play, the club suffered for it. The team suffered for it, and you could tell. Yeah. So it was really nice to have them, firing, and they tended to be on form more than not. But two players that tended to be more off form than on form at times was Dolan and Cantwell. Now let's talk about Cantwell first. So he comes in, we're getting all excited. Rangers fans are in our DMs saying, oh, well, he's absolutely atrocious. We're glad to get rid of him. He's just lazy. And I'll be honest, saw quite a bit of it. I didn't want to see it. I was blinkered. I was desperate to see this very talented player that was going to glide around the pitch, be maybe a little bit more of a mobile DAC kind of player. So, just you have a little bit of skill, but get himself forward. I'm not going to lie. Probably ended the season a little bit more disappointed with him. I had him more of like a 6 out of 10. And that was nothing to do with what he did on the pitch necessarily. It's just my expectations. I just expected him to be a little bit more, which begs the question, were the Rangers fans right?
Yeah, see, I think people have been a bit harsh on Cantwell. I think they've been that because of that, almost the opposite to Pears. They're expecting a match winner, aren't they, every week?
Yeah.
I think he's unfairly judged as being lazy. I don't think he is lazy at all. I think he works incredibly hard, actually, when you watch him. What he isn't is that's not natural to him. So he's not quick, is he? His acceleration, if you like, is pretty middle to below average. So when he's pressing, it's not something, it's not like Dolan when he's all out doing it. But he does work really hard. I think what it was for me was he's at an age now where I needed to see a little bit more consistency. And I felt he impacted games when we'd either already won the game or it was a bit easier to impact it. So I felt he was always trying to be the cherry on top of the cake, rather than actually what we needed a player of that quality was to be the actual main ingredient, the one who goes, right, I'm going to bring this together. And he wasn't that. Now, that's maybe unfair of us. Maybe we're judging him on something that we hoped he would be than what he actually is. But I think he's unfairly judged as being lazy. I think he works really hard. And actually, when you look at his numbers, I think the goals has been disappointing. He got 1 goal from out open play, didn't he? And 3 in total. Did he get 6, 7, and 7 assists, wasn't it? He should have had more than that. But I actually think if you take that further back, and I know they're looking to all sorts of stats, and I think they even have I think my favourite one at the minute is the assist of the assist. But he was generally at the key, at any key points to our goals or build-up play, he was in it somewhere. And he was often doing something that somebody couldn't do. I remember there was one where he just quickened the play up, pinged it out wide, didn't get the assist. I think Britain got it. It might have been against Leeds, actually. It wasn't against Leeds because that was a penalty. But there was a ball came in from Britain. He gets the assist, but actually, it was all about Campbell. I just I'd have loved to have seen it more. But maybe that's unfair.
I think that's the thing for me. Just more. I just wanted more. It was the same with Dolan. When it comes to these players, these ones that can unlock a defence and so on, you just want to see better decisions. You want to see it that little bit more. You want it to be that they're the X factor. I don't expect it every game, but more often than what I was seeing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. I think when you look at the actual numbers, I think they've been okay for Campbell. They're not. I think what we hoped for, I knew we weren't going to get the goals of Smodics, but we wanted that talisman, didn't we? And he wasn't really the driving force behind the team. He was a nice bonus. He got decent numbers, but we wanted the numbers of a player that was linked for 20, 30 million pounds, didn't we? We wanted him to come and go, actually, I think we talked about him not being here next season and saying, do you know what, if he comes in, he's either going to be a massive success or not. And in fact, he's been more middle of the road. I thought he might come in with this real drive and be getting numbers of like 20 goals and assists combined. And he's not done. He's got 10. So, yeah, I'm a bit disappointed in terms of that. But I do think if you look back at most of our goals this season, when he's been on the pitch, he's had a real key element of it. And I think sometimes his numbers have been a bit skewed by that. But I think it's just because we hold him to a higher level. We wanted him to be, 20, 30 million he was linked once upon a time with. And we
I think that's it. I think I wanted just to see more from him more of the time. I get what you're saying, but I mean, it's similar to Dolan, like I said. I mean, let's talk about Dolan now. I mean, he was someone that was very frustrating at times. His decision-making was not there. You take out the last batch of games that we had, the season for him wasn't that good from a stats point. He'd lost the ball. I felt like that every time he touched the ball, the next person to touch it was probably the opposition by either a throw-in, a goal kick, or he just flat out passed it to them. And it was getting really frustrating. It came down to football intelligence to me. It was something I've said quite a bit over the season. And I think the team at times have had pretty poor football intelligence and decision making, and he was one of the key culprits for me. There was times where he'd go into a blind alley, but he didn't necessarily have the skills and pace to get out of it. And then when he started to simplify his game, he was getting more rewards. He was getting the crosses in. Beat the man, get a cross in, or beat the man, and if you need to turn back and recycle the ball, turn back and recycle. But there was a lot of times, some of the times he was dancing in the middle of nowhere, and you're like, well, I don't really get what you're trying to achieve. But then suddenly, under Ishmael, it started to click, and he became he's probably, arguably, the key player that got us back into that playoff shout.
Yeah, I think its season was in 2 or 3 parts, really. He came into the season, didn't he, saying, I want to be the man. Somebody stepped up every year that when somebody's left, whether that's Armstrong, Dak, Brereton, Smodics has now gone, I want to be that man. I want to nail down the position. Now, the season before, he was supposed to be nailing down Brereton's position on the left wing. This season, he was supposed to be nailing down the number 10 role. Numbers-wise, he's not done that. And I think we were all left a little bit... It's always a big debate with Tyree Stolen, isn't it? Because he's 23. He's 2 years younger than Buckley. He's 2 years younger than Rankin Costello. He's only a couple of years older than Harry Leonard. But he's played 200 games now. So you're thinking... You're always having this debate in your mind with, at his age, should he have learnt more? Number of games, should he have learnt more? But actually, he's only 23. It's kind of one of them with him all the time. We always want more consistency. Maybe that's always going to be the case with him. Maybe that's the type of player he is. But then actually, as the season went on, and like you say, it went under Ishmael, actually, in the darkest times of the season, he shone. He became, and I used the word a few times, and I think it's the right word, is really brave. So he was demanding the ball and getting the ball in areas of the pitch when the atmosphere was toxic, whatever. And other players were hiding. There was one game in particular, and I can't remember which one it was for the life of me, Middlesbrough. And people were hiding on that football pitch. They were making themselves look like they were available, and they were never available for the ball. And he was going everywhere across the pitch to get the ball, trying to do something, trying to drive the team. Really brave, that is, because he didn't need to. He could have stood himself out on the right wing, probably not seen much of the ball, and no one would have really picked him out. And he was a real driving force, as well as Travis. I felt he was one on the pitch that was a real leader. Not something you'd associate with Dolan. And as the season went on... I
felt like that run of really poor form, because everyone was playing so crap, it did give him that freedom to say, you know what, everyone's playing crap, I may as well just have a go.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I just felt like there is that, but I just felt it takes some balls to do that. When the atmosphere and everyone's having a pop at the slightest thing, because everyone's just frustrated with life, to put yourself out on a limb is brave. Now, whatever his motivation is he playing for a move, playing for a contract? Is he just playing for pride? Is it for love of the club? Who knows what the motivation was? I don't really care. What I saw was a player that was wanting more from the team, wanting more from what they were getting, and was prepared to put himself out on a limb for it. And I will be forever, if that is his last game in a Rovers shirt, I will look at him differently than I've ever looked at him. I've looked at him before as this person who, his shirt's up there, amazing with kids, really good role model, would have loved more consistency, got talent. Like you, I question sometimes his decision-making more often than not, actually. And I think he's somebody who you always go, he should be getting more goals, more assists. But actually, now I'm looking at him and saying, do you know what? You're a bit of a leader. Not something I thought he had in his locker, if I'm being honest. And fair play to him. And if that's the last time we ever see him in a Rovers shirt, whereas I think he could have got some stick, I don't think he will now, because I think fans have seen somebody who, sometimes people down tools towards the end of a season if they're moving on. And complete opposite, wasn't it?
Yeah, definitely that run of form at the end has changed a lot of people's opinions, including mine. I gave him pelters, but just as I've said all along, if I say something slightly negative, I want to be proved wrong, and if I say something positive, I want to be proved right. And I was quite negative about a lot of him, but that was because I rated him so highly and I wanted him to perform, and he finished the season and really, really strong. It was a team effort to an extent, but like you say, he was one of the ones that grabbed the game by the scruff of the neck. But moving on to some of the other players, because we're not even halfway through and we're already on the 90-minute mark. We then move on to the two main strikers, which are Gay and Ohashi. Now, like we said, we knew nothing about at the start of the season. All we knew is as Ohashi had effectively had a full season on his own, and then obviously come into Rovers. Now, looking back with Gay, I'm comparing him now to Sam Gallagher, and I didn't see an upgrade on Sam Gallagher necessarily, but I've seen potential. Is that kind of where you're at with Gay?
Yeah, I think Gay and Gallagher are the two that you're right to link. I think I've seen more impact from Gay than I did from Gallagher in last season. I think we saw more impact from Gay than we would have got from Gallagher. Stoke fans would agree. I don't necessarily think he's a better footballer, but I think we've had more from him. And I think that's possibly as much a reflection on Sam Gallagher, unfortunately. But yeah, I think I worry about him next season. I think the way that we're playing football now doesn't suit him at all. But there was a spell in the season when he was really a key element for us. I think he's very much going to be a plan B player. And that's okay. I just don't think he will want to be that player. But anyway, that's for next week. But yeah, I think, did he do better than we hoped? I think probably not. No, but I do think he upgraded us on Gallagher in terms of impact, just purely because Gallagher's never on the pitch enough.
That's the thing. 6 goals, 6 assists in 23 starts, 21 sub appearances. It's not terrible. It's not great that he got more yellow cards than goals. He got 9 yellows. He got 1 red card. So he loves to collect disciplinary points over goals and goal involvement. But he did have games like against West Brom where, it just clicked. And when you see these glimpses, that's what you want. But that's exactly what Sam Gallagher did. So he's definitely one I really want to talk to you about next week. Ohashi, on the other hand, you could just tell the qualities there. The goals he scored early on, the little dink over the keeper, the Luton goal and stuff like that, you can just tell the qualities there. He's got energy. He's got discipline. Seems like the kind of player that you need in the team. He seems like the kind of player Ishmael would really work with as well. 9 goals, 3 assists for a player that didn't play the whole season. I mean, yes, he got 26 appearances and 10 off the bench, but he's someone that I think is someone that we can really get behind going into next year. His position can change. You can tell he's got the ability to drop in to be that number 10 as well as being the striker. Do you think he's the kind of player that Ishmael's going to work with?
Yeah, I think we'll see a better Yuki Ohashi next season as well. I think for a first season, when he'd already played a season's worth of games, settling into English football, arriving quite late into it as well. Yeah. A big impact, and I actually think we'll see the best of him next season.
I agree, and I do think that you're right with Gay. He's going to be a plan B. Ohashi is definitely a starter in this team. Yes, okay, he might need to rotate, but he's definitely a starter. He's definitely got that energy. One person that we probably won't see next year is Andy Vyman. Now, Andy Vyman was someone that you sang his praises. You said that if you had someone having a one-on-one, he'd be the guy. He propped up with 7 goals, 2 assists, which was way more than I expected out of him. A very experienced player. How would you sum up his season?
Really good. I think he had the impact I hoped he would. I do think we'll see him next season. I think he will have a similar impact. I think that experience just told at times, and I think he possibly should have played a little bit more than he did in the end. But yeah, I think get a good pre-season under his belt, and I think we will see that person off the bench that you can rely on a little bit. And I think he will be here next season. So yeah, I've been pleased with him.
Yeah, I was. It was a surprise signing, but he was the kind of signings we were talking about. Someone that's got experience, someone that can come in and talk to players and maybe offer some depth across that, the attacking 3 behind the striker. And he did that, and I thought he played really well, and he offered something. One player I was disappointed is Ryan Hedges. When it came to minutes played, he was 8th. So he kept himself relatively fit for Ryan Hedges. But 1 goal, 2 assists, it's just not enough. And it's not just the stats, as we say. There's a lot that goes into it. But he showed some qualities at times over the last couple of seasons. But this one, he just didn't seem to fire. And, he was under more pressure with the fact that Cantwell came in. Dolan obviously was playing so much with Andy Vyman coming in. And you've got a player in Ryan Hedges that is fast becoming just a squad player, someone that's on the bench. And at 29 years old, does he want to be doing that? I don't know. But I was pretty disappointed with him this year.
Yeah, I've tried to have a look into him a bit this weekend, and I think he stayed fitter than he ever has. So you would have hoped for more. I do think the more I look at it, the way we set up under Eustace relied on a lot of elements that Ryan Hedges probably doesn't excel in terms of getting up the pitch really quickly. And I think the way that we want to play next season, we might actually see more from him. I think if you look at that Luton game, he's quite an intelligent footballer, Ryan Hedges, and he gets a bit of grief from Rovers fans, but he's got a lot of football intelligence. He knows where to be at the right times. What he hasn't necessarily got as much of is the physical attributes in terms of getting up the pitch quick enough. But then he's deceptively quick when he gets going. Anyway, I would have expected more from him. I would have hoped for more. But I do think some of that's the way we set up and what we asked of him. I think sometimes we asked him to be a bit more defensive and sometimes we asked too much of him. So I'm still hopeful for Hedges next season. I'm not saying he'll play every minute. I do think you're right. I think he's a squad player. But I actually think even might play less games, but I think we'll have more impact from him.
No, I agree. I can't see him leaving. He does seem like the kind of player that you need, and you do need this depth. You do need these kind of players, in the squad. And I completely agree. His intelligence seems like a really nice guy. Seems like he's very well liked. So I do want him around. Now we're now getting into the players that didn't necessarily play a hell of a lot. Now I'm saving 2 for the end, so don't worry, Rovers fans, if you are listening. I haven't forgot about them, but I do think they need discussion. So these ones are going to be relatively quick fire for you, Mark. So, so Lewis Baker.
Played in the wrong position. 6 out of 10. Went to Stoke, became an 8.5 out of 10 and saved their season.
I think it was underutilised. I think we had an opportunity, but I think he suffered mainly because Travis and Tronstad started so well.
Yeah, I think he was brought in to cover that position, and that's not his position. So,
no.
Yeah.
Deon Sanderson?
Did a job. Don't think he's good enough. Don't want to see him back next season. Don't understand the fact that Rovers fans seem really upset by it. Came in and did a job. Thank you very much. Move on.
100% agree. When people were talking about us buying him, I was like, God, no. As much as he seems like a solid player, we have bigger needs than going and spending whatever money we'd need to spend on getting him.
Yeah.
Forshaw.
Felt a bit sorry for Forshaw. I think he's had a bit of a bad rep because of where he's come from. He's come with championship promotion experience. I think he's done a job at a time when we needed somebody to come in and do a job. People said he was made of Weetabix and he's managed to stay fit. So I'm quite happy with him. I reckon I don't know, but I reckon he's really good around the place as well. He's got that experience of promotion like I talked about. He's done all right for me. He's been exactly what I wanted. He's probably not delighted to be on the bench, but he's okay with it. He accepts that's his role, and you need them players in the squad. So probably a 6.5 out of 10, but that's fine. I think I'm happy with that.
The word I'd use for him is professional. He seems like just the kind of professional you need around the squad. I mean, I'd have him as a middle of the road 5 out of 10 because he didn't do anything terrible, didn't do anything great. I think, like you say, the bad rep comes from the fact that when you're expecting to get all these signings coming in winter and Adam Forshaw walks through the door, you're onto a bit of a hiding. Another player that obviously did come through the door was Woodrow. Would you say that he's similar to the Forshaw or even less than that?
No, I think he's less than that. I wouldn't want to see him come back, really. I didn't see much from him. I couldn't tell you his best position either.
No, he was a panic signing. You could tell it was a panic signing. Emmanuel Dennis?
Disappointing.
I mean, you can tell the talent's there. It's just if you signed him on a free transfer at the start of the season on a good wage, I'd have been absolutely delighted and said, right, this is the kind of risk he's signing. But he's on a hell of a lot of money. He's they'd expect a lot of money for him. So I'm just like, well, no, you haven't shown enough for me to do anything. I mean, one appearance starting, five off the bench to get 1 assist, 1 yellow and 1 red. I mean, Jesus Christ, it's not as like he was ripping it up for us. But yeah, you could tell there was something there, but not for us. Obviously, the big loan signing that we kind of brought in was Koji Dewberry, and I was very disappointed in him.
Very much. I think we would have got more from Dylan Markande. However, Markande's got more from going on loan. Disappointing. Hoped he will be a bit of a difference maker, and no, not for me.
No. Harry Leonard got a bit unlucky with his injuries. He was someone that we said that if we got the strikers in, he would probably go out on loan. Now, he's a player that I think we're all quite excited about to see what he does. It's a terrible time to get an injury at 21 years old at this part of your career. Do you think he's going to kick on now?
I hope so. I hope that the injuries will be behind him. But he came back early pre-season, didn't he, with Gilsonan, and the pair of them got injured again. So they need to really focus on getting to the root of the problem and making sure he's right, because he's got something that you can't teach, which is a knack of knowing where the ball lands.
Yeah, he's got that instinct, that striker's instinct that you want your number 9 to have. And I'm not ready to let Leonard go. I mean,
I still like to when you watched him play and his pressing and how intelligent he is with it, and you were spot on with that. Yeah. I think in the way Ishmael plays football, he will find himself playing more football than Gay will. But forget that for now. His focus has to be on making sure he's fit and available.
Well, that's my worry. You look at Gilsonan and what's happened to him this week with the fact that, we were talking about this lad being, his injuries, the club have let him go. I don't want Leonard to be in the same situation because you can tell Leonard has that talent. And I just hope we look after him. That strength and conditioning, part of the club that I've been slagging off so much. I hope they get it right with him. My mate Eustace. What do you think of his performances?
Super Eustace. Very raw. Pace that we needed, but he's very raw.
Yeah. There's no point in us talking about Tijon, McFadden or Duru. But Christian Montgomery, we did see a little bit more of. What was your glimpses of him?
Pleasantly surprised. Yeah, I've seen him play in the 21s as a holding midfielder. Saw him play at Burnley's training ground once upon a time, actually. And he's looked decent. There's a few youngsters that are looking like they've got a chance. And I think they'll get more of a chance under Ishmael next season. Pleasant surprise. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And Sigurdsson, obviously, 5 appearances off the bench. Very disappointing career for Rovers in general. He's up there with the Campwells for me, where you just expect a little bit more out of them because of their experience, where they've come from, what they've done. I mean, he's got a low rating for us, hasn't
he? Yeah. Just disappointing all around, wasn't it? Not available enough. Showed you glimpses at times. The goal against Oxford, great goal, but nowhere near enough.
No. And I've saved 2 players. I think it's pretty obvious now who I've saved. Now, that is John Buckley and Joe Rankin Costello, because I've got these 2 as ones that we definitely need to talk about next week. John Buckley goes out on loan to Sheffield Wednesday. That was this season. It feels like ages ago, doesn't it?
Last season, that
was last season. Yeah. He didn't do anything there. He came back. He showed a few glimpses, and then this year he's done nothing. And he was someone that I know that you rated him when he was younger. But when you're younger, potential's got to turn into ability, and the potential just doesn't seem to be turning into everything. Was you disappointed with him this year?
Yeah, I think he's had a lack of opportunities, but I think that's the right thing at the same time. I think we should have had more rotation. So, I'm contradicting myself a little bit there, but he never really, when he did get a chance, he never made himself indispensable. He never took the shirt, and he did have a couple of runs. Same with Rankin Costello. I think I don't know where his best position is. He doesn't really look like somebody who comes on and impacts games anymore. John Buckley and Rankin Costello, very similar boat. They're both 25 now, so 2 years older than Dolan. They are same age as Hayden Carter, and I think whilst I don't worry about Carter quite as much, I think a big career moment for them too.
Yeah, no, your cat's out the bag, JRC. Let's talk about him. He was someone that we said needed to nail down a position, probably. He's played everywhere along the right-hand side. He's played in the centre. He's even popped up on the left. And you can become a victim of your own success when you're a utility player. And he's definitely one of them. I mean, he got himself a couple of the goals. He got 3 assists. So he played a decent amount. I mean, minutes-wise, he's 16th on the list. So he did get to play some minutes. But he just seemed out of sorts the majority of the time. And it's such a shame because I really rate him. I mean, we've discussed, is he best at right back? Is he best in centre mid? Is he best on the right wing? I liked him on the right wing at times. I liked him at centre mid because I felt like he's that little bit taller than you expect him to be. And he's got a bit of size to him. I didn't like him at right back. I think for me, Carter's your cover at right back if anything happens to Britain. JRC now needs to look at the season he's had, in my opinion, and decide what he wants out of his career. Because when he came on, I don't know, I didn't get that same energy feel from him. There was just something not right with him.
Yeah, there was twice that stands out to me that he did. So I think I disagree slightly. I think his best position was right back under Thomason. Quite a niche role where he's inverted right back. But actually, when you look back at Joe Rankin Costello's Rovers careers to date, the moments that you remember are when the games turned a bit bonkers. So there was the Huddersfield one where from right back he was did he have 9 shots on goal? And the 2 times this season that stand out for me are Leeds away when he came on. I think he came on at right back. and he grabbed the game by the scruff of the neck a little bit and got an assist. And then Plymouth away, he did the same thing. He always seems to pop up in the opposition box. And I think that's probably why Eustace didn't play him. So there was the game against Blackpool in the Cup that ended his centre midfield hopes under Eustace. And he just never played him ever again there. He started the season on the right wing and did okay, but didn't really impact much. And then he filled in at right back and he did all right again. But I don't think he was trusted defensively and positionally. When the game's a bit chaos and it needs a bit of chaos, I think that's when he's at his best. But he doesn't want that. He doesn't want to be somebody who comes off the bench to try and rescue a game when it's pretty much gone. So I think absolutely we'll talk about him next week. But I don't know what he is. The fact that he's not been on the bench the last couple of weeks and I've not thought it was the wrong decision probably tells us where his season's gone.
Well, let's move on to the awards now, mate, because we've spoken about every player that, put on a Rovers shirt this year. Now let's start to think about some of the awards. So let's think about the more negative ones. So who was your underachiever of the year?
I have gone for Hayden Carter. Now, I could have gone Buckley, I could have gone Rankin Costello. I've gone Hayden Carter because I hold Hayden Carter on a bit of a pedestal that I think he should be one of the players in the squad that can play Premier League football. And he's dropped from that to right now, I would play Hyam and Bart, like I'd said. I think he's struggled when he's played at right back, whereas previously I thought he's done okay. I go back to the Portsmouth game. He got an absolute skinning from Murphy, didn't he? But yeah, I picked him because I thought we'd be going to the end of the season going, well, Hayden Carter's our number one centre half. Who's alongside him? And actually, I think he's going to struggle to get in the team right now. I think the potential's still there, and that's why I'm saying I think for me he's underachieved because he should have been a mainstay in our team at 25 now, and I've not seen him kick on. I've seen him maybe not drop too much, but he's certainly not kicked on.
So I'm in two minds about mine. It was either Ryan Hedges or JRC. Hedges was, 8th in minutes played, but to play in an attacking position and a very attacking position to only get 1 goal, 2 assists, but not really be much part of any real positive play was a bit disappointing. But I am going to go with JRC. I really hope this year he would have cracked on. And we're talking about lack of depth in the team. We're talking about people being tired and needing. He had the perfect opportunity to come in and take some positions, and he never did. And, if you're a utility man and you've got a team there that's absolutely on its arse, you should be coming in and saying, this is my position. And he didn't, to only get 13 starts for someone who I think is quite talented at 25, I think he's very disappointing. So moving on from the underachiever, the other slightly negative one was worst moment of the season. So for you, what was your worst moment of the season?
Being in the away end at Derby. The culmination of the Eustace factor and then the absolute diabolical start to that game. I was ironically lower than a snake's belly. Yeah.
I agree. I had John Eustace leaving straight the Derby game because it got to a point where you just felt like the club was just on this decline. Our social media was just full of negativity, and it was all around that. I think it was very disappointing. But let's move on to the positives now, Mark, because that's what we like to do. So, who do you think was the best signing?
I've gone for Danny Bart.
Interesting.
I have. I was tying between, obviously, I'm sure probably one that you've gone for, but I probably again because of my expectations. I thought he's coming in as maybe a bit of cover when we go 3 at the back, and I think he was our best centre half. And I think he had the impact he had in the team. The run of form was when he was in it, and the run of poor form was when he wasn't. And I didn't expect that. Yeah.
No. Well, I've gone for the obvious one of Ohashi. Not necessarily what he did this year, but the glimpses of what we're seeing going into next year.
100%
Because how much was he? What the rumoured being bought for? Because it wasn't free, was it? There is a
no.
fee
I think it was
involved.
about £500,000. I think was reported. Yeah,
and you can just tell he's got quality. I mean, I had mates messaging me saying, that Ohashi looks quality, and you could just tell the glimpses. And for me, he's someone that's going to, he's going to be with us now for another couple of years plus. He's a good age now to be with us at 28. You can tell he's disciplined. You can tell he's a professional. He's definitely the kind of player I think would take my best signing. Youth is a difficult one, talking youth player, because we just didn't bring anyone in. I mean, the only real one that played was Christy Montgomery. There wasn't anyone else that we could. I mean, he only played like 3 games, was it in total, including bench? Yeah, 2 off the bench, 1. It's a bit of a loose one, but would you give it to Christy Montgomery?
I thought Duru, if you remember, played early on in the season. Showed quite a bit of energy. Came on at Turf Moor and did okay. And he's gone, and I've cheated a little bit because he's gone on loan, and he's probably we'll talk about the loans next week, but he's the one who's had the biggest impact really on loan. Arguably, he's looked like somebody who could come back and really challenge Callum Britton. I don't think he'll overtake Callum Britton, but I do think he could be a real option there. So I've kind of cheated. I've gone Leo Duru. But I think the reason that this was in a little bit was because we always have people we're choosing from. You're looking at 2 or 3. And actually, one of the things the club have really pointed to under Eustace was he was not playing young players. Before Montgomery, nobody had made their debut. And that is something that's never, ever happened for the club. So,
no.
Yeah.
No, it was disappointing. I'm glad it's highlighted, and hopefully next year is different. So before I ask you what your best moment of the season was, I'm going to ask you as well who you think your player of the year is. Who do you think was better than expected?
Better than expected. This was the most difficult because I actually could have given this to 3 or 4. I've gone Lewis Travis because I have Lewis Travis. If he'd have left for $1.5 million, I'd have been okay with that. Whereas now I'd be absolutely crying into my Weetabix. Yeah.
I had loads that I could pick from. There was Travis, Danny Bart, Owen Beck. These were players I didn't really know what to expect from. I think the Danny Bart one for me was the one that I thought was better than expected, because Travis and Tronstad, I knew there was something there, but I just thought Danny Bart was coming just to be a coach on the training ground. I didn't expect him to really do what he was doing. I was close with Owen Beck though, because I didn't know what to expect, but I think he's definitely a player that if we could go and get him for a good signing, good wage, I think I'd be happy about. But obviously further up the pitch than left back. What was your best moment?
Again, 2 or 3 I tied with, and I've gone. So I've had to say 2. So there was the Derby game, because we were going into the season not knowing, ironically, the first Derby game, we've gone into the season not knowing really, had we? We were very much, I don't know what this is going to be. What's it going to look like? And if you remember the feeling after that game, Ewood was rocking. There was replica shirts everywhere. There was wearing the pink shirt. Hashi looks like a player. Gade's done all right. We're playing some decent football. We beat them for, Carter's sending people on their arse. And you're thinking, do you know what? That really gave us a spark, I think, for the season. But I think if I was picking one moment, it's Yuki Ohashi's ball in the back of the net at Sheffield United.
So that was one of my 2. The other one was Vyman's against the Dingles.
Of course.
So I think we both agreed then the Ohashi one, because it's after the season that we'd had, to have that moment of really thinking it could happen. And I think we kind of all knew deep down it wasn't going to happen still, because there was a long way of the game to go. But just to have that moment and the limbs was amazing. Yeah. But the Vyman goal for me, it was so unexpected, just the quality, the opposition, everything about it. For me, I think the Vyman one was definitely one that needs to be up there for a moment of the season. Obviously, everyone put your comments down below on all your thoughts on who you should get awards, but definitely let's talk about the positive moments. So make sure you put some comments down below on the positive moments that got you up off your seat. I'm going to ask you now your player of the year. So this is something we didn't necessarily expect to talk about. Now, mine is Callum Britton. Now, the reason I'm going Callum Britton is just the whole package with it. I know he had his injuries, but when he played, it was positive. He defended well, he attacked well. We've seen better with him. But not only that, he's just improved so much. And it was kind of unexpected for him to improve as much as he did. I mean, the beauty of being in the family stand at Ewood is you get to see the right back really, really close. So in one of the halves, you got to see him work, and you could just see his vision, his movement, everything about him had just improved so much. Yeah. There was loads of players we could talk about, but for me, it's Callum Britton.
Yeah, and that's one man I was toying between. I think if him, Travis or Tronstad had got player of the year, you couldn't really argue. It turned out it was Tronstad, wasn't it? But the one I've gone for is the one I think will get player of the year, and I don't know if they've announced that yet, but it's Lewis Travis. I think to come back from being whizzed out the door, albeit by the previous manager, to regain the captaincy, and deservedly so. And I think he led the team at West Brom when they were at their lowest. But he also showed quality that I didn't know he had. I think he's become a better footballer now. I think he's more than just a bit of a housery artist. It's funny when he does it now because he does it with real purpose and intent. He makes me laugh on the football pitch. But then I also watch him getting stuck in, and I don't think he's as reckless with it anymore. And I just think he's really matured at 27. He's now looking a bloody good Championship midfielder. And that game at West Brom for me was probably performance of the season by an individual in many ways. And I think for the whole package, the way he's led the team as well as his performances, considering where he's come from, I think it was Lewis Travis for me.
Yeah, I think there's a few players it could have been, but we've mentioned two there that have really stepped up. They've really stepped up for us. We want to get their contracts sorted to make sure that they're with us, along with the Tronstad as well. But that's for next week's conversation. We're rounding off this season. It's been a nice bumper 2-hour pod. I believe this is a record-breaking podcast for us now.
We have had a couple of people. We have had a couple of people saying they want their 2-hour pod. So this is for you. Don't say we don't do things for you guys. Is all I would say. We could have split it into two, but we didn't. So yeah.
No, we didn't want to. We like chatting Rovers. We're a couple of fans that love chatting Rovers. But before we do end this podcast, that we're going to round off the season of 24-25. And where we go into next week, and we only talk about the future. Is there anything else you want to talk about with this season, or are you happy to stick a line underneath it and move on?
I think we draw a line, we move on, and what I would say is I'm ready for action. I want to see actions, not words. Yeah, what about you?
Beautifully put. Beautifully put. Well, Mark, thank you for being with me for the whole season of podcasts and to review this one. It's been an absolute honour, and I'm looking forward to season 2 of the Blackburn End Pod starting next week. Are you excited?
I'm excited. I am excited. We've got new graphics ready to go. Are we going to launch them next week? Do we go new season, new us already? Or is that what we're doing?
I think so. Right. I think it's about time we cracked them open.
Good. Right, let's do it.
Well, you guys have got that to look forward to, so we'll round it off there. Obviously, comment down below everything we've spoken about. What are your favourite moments? Whether you agree, disagree, start the conversations down below. We read them all. It's really good fun. But Mark, thank you, and looking forward to next week.
Absolutely, mate. And can I just say, for those people, I mentioned him last week, and I shared his, his GoFundMe page. But Owen Waring, he's had a big op this week. He's touch wood, doing really well. And thank you to those people who supported him. Rovers fan over in Canada, watches every game, listens to the podcast every week. So yeah, thank you, Rovers fans, for that.
100%, and our hearts are still with you, mate. So, yeah, hopefully next week we're talking some positive news about rumours of contracts and stuff being signed. But now it's all about the future. So, hopefully you've enjoyed this one. Enjoy your 2 hours, and we'll see you next season.